George R.R. Martin skyrocketed to fame through his Game of Thrones novels, which have sold more than 20 million copies worldwide and are the basis of a wildly popular HBO series as well. The books are inspired by real historical events such as the War of the Roses, but also feature fantasy elements, including dragons and sorcery. Correspondent Gwyneth Dolan talked with Martin at the Jean Cocteau Cinema in Santa Fe, which he also owns, about his process, the pressure from his fans to finish his books, and how he keeps track of the hundreds of characters he's created.
George R.R. Martin, thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. Welcome to the Jean Cocteau.
Thank you. So you originally thought there would be 3 books in the series that begins with A Game of Thrones, and that each book would take a year or so to write.
Yes. I was young and foolish in those days.
That was 20 years ago.
Oh, God. More than 20 years ago, actually. I think 1991 I started writing this. I actually didn't know how many books or whether there would be any books when I started writing it. Maybe this is a short story. Maybe it's a novella. At a certain point, I decided it was a novel, and then pretty clearly jumped to trilogy because I knew it was an epic fantasy. And in those days, in the early mid-90s, the general form of epic fantasies was still trilogies. That had been kind of set in stone ever since J.R.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings had come out back in the 50s. And oddly enough, Tolkien's novel was not a trilogy when he wrote it. He wrote one long book. It was his publisher who decided that it had to be divided into 3 volumes. The Tolkien trilogy was a big success, and then everybody started doing trilogies. That's what I thought mine would be initially, but obviously, as it did with Tolkien, the tale grew in the telling, and it burst out of the trilogy bounds pretty quickly.
Well, now you have millions of loyal fans who are clamoring for the next installment, and by clamoring, I mean sometimes not so politely. I mean, they're haranguing, begging, demanding. Do you feel an obligation to them?
Obligation is an odd word. I don't know I would go with that word. I certainly feel a desire to finish the book. And it must be said that I do get a lot of emails and mails of the type you're describing. There are also many that are supportive, and probably far more of people saying, take your time, I love the books, whenever you're ready, I'll be here. Of course, which is an attitude that I find far more pleasant than the endless, when will it be done? When will it be done? I've actually given up answering the question when it will be done. In the early days, you know, especially after the 3rd book, because the 4th book took a really long time, and I kept being wrong. People said when it would be done, and I would give an answer, and then it would not be done by then. I would run into some problem, or I would decide to rewrite, or I would change course. And once you give a date and then you miss that date, that's like, there's an element of the audience that thinks you're doing it deliberately, and
right.
You know, there are even some strange conspiracy theorists out there who are convinced that I finished the whole thing years ago, but I'm just hiding the books in my cellar and releasing them in order to maximize something or other. There's a lot of craziness that goes on, but it's pressure, and you know, the obligation is to the work itself. I'm telling a story. It's however many books you divide it into, 3 books, 4 books, 7 books, which is what I'm presently going for. It's one story, much as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is one story. It has a beginning, it has a lot of middle, and eventually it will have an end.
But does that pressure from all of those people, and from HBO, from your publisher, does that get under your skin? Does it rattle you? Does it make it harder for you to sit down and write?
Yeah, to some extent it does. But when the writing is going well, it doesn't matter. You know, when I'm there and working, and I just kind of fall through my computer screen, and I forget the world, I forget deadlines, I forget the TV show and the emails and all of that stuff, and it's just me and the characters and the world that I'm describing, and I'm writing a page at a time and a scene at a time and a word at a time.
You create so many characters. We have a hard time keeping track of them sometimes. How do you do it? I mean, do you have a wall where you've tacked pictures or note cards, or is your mind just
I
paperless?
do have note cards, and well, not note cards, but I have computer files. I have genealogies and charts and things like that, and I have some pieces of paper on which I've scrolled a few things, but less than you would think. Most of it is my mind. I often say that it's probably some strange sort of mental illness or something that I'm using the synapses in my brain that most people use for remembering real people, to remember all these characters. It's like I meet real people and I forget their names 2 minutes after I meet them. It's in one ear and out the other. You know, I wish everybody went through life with name tags all the time. I would probably be much better. My mind is a sieve as far as remembering real people. But I can remember these characters that I introduced for one scene 10 years ago in book 2 or something like that, and you know who they are and what they look like, and that's stuck in my brain. So that surely is a sign that I'm deranged, but hopefully it's a good sort of derangement that allows me to write these books.
Your characters are perhaps more colorful than our own lives, but I'm thinking of the Hound and Jaime Lannister and Daenerys. They're constantly doing things that are amazing and shocking and evil, and we're terrified. And then they'll do something like a grandmother will murder a child, and we jump off the couch like this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. Yes.
He was a particularly nasty child.
He was terrible and he deserved it. Yeah. But it presents a lot of interesting ethical situations. I think somewhere there's a college professor teaching a class called Game of Thrones, you know, the ethics.
Actually, I believe there are several classes being taught in Game of Thrones around the country.
Is ethics something that intrigues you?
Yes, you know, ethics, morality, the whole question of right and wrong, of heroism and villainy. These are all issues. I mean, I've always taken as my writing mantra what William Faulkner said in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, where he said the only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself, and I believe that. And that's what you see in Game of Thrones, and hopefully in many of my other earlier works as well. And that exists in all good literature, I believe. Genre doesn't matter. I mean, I've worked primarily in genres of science fiction and fantasy, to some extent in horror, and I read a lot in those genres, but I also read in many other genres, from literary fiction and classics of literature, mystery novels, thrillers, historical fiction. I love historical fiction. And genre doesn't matter, whether it has spaceships in it or vampires or dragons. Still, it can't be about the spaceships. You know, it has to be about the people on the spaceship, the human heart in conflict with itself. It can't be about the castle or the dragon. It has to be about the dragon's mother, in the case of Daenerys, and what she chooses to do with the immense power conferred on her by these engines of destruction that have been put into her hands. That's where my interest lies, the human heart in conflict with itself.
There has been criticism of the sexual violence in the books, and perhaps more so in the show, and they're different. And that is historically accurate. I mean, war treated women, always has treated women very, very badly.
Yes, rape has taken place in virtually every war that ever happened, and not just in ancient times, although in medieval times it was so endemic, it was almost accepted as, you know, that was part of what happened in war, and if your town was taken, then the other army would rape all your women. It continues to this day. I mean, the rape camps in Bosnia a few years ago, the stuff that happened in World War II. I mean, it's there. It's always there. You can't leave it out.
So it is historically accurate, but you've also taken advantage of the possibilities of fantasy by creating female characters who couldn't have existed, and who warriors, manipulative priestesses, the queen with dragons.
Well, the dragons certainly did not exist. Although it should be pointed out, I'll get back to the main question in a minute, but it should be pointed out that in the real medieval times, people believed in dragons. People believed in witches, you know. So like we include a witch, like Melisandre in my books called the Red Witch, and she's a fantasy element because we didn't have that in the real world. But the people who, living in that real world thought they had it. They executed women because they thought they were witches. They hung them, or they burned them, or they pressed them to death under large stones. And if you could bring one here with a time machine, they would say, of course we had witches. What are you talking about? Witches were real. They killed my cow with a spell. They gave me warts. They you know, had suckled the devil every night under the dark of the moon. And they believed there were dragons out there. They believed there were manticores. And if you believe something enough, it becomes part of your world, and it affects the way you live your life, and it affects the decisions you make. And you know, getting back to the issue, yeah, I've added dragons, I've added some fantasy elements, some magic and all that, but I don't think the women are magical. Yeah.
But to be historically accurate would be to limit your character development. It's more fun to move into fantasy with women.
I don't think I have moved into fantasy with women aside from Danny's Dragons. I think you can find an analog for every one of the women in my books. Yeah, they're unusual. They're the exception. They're not the rule. You know, but the exception is what you want to write about. You don't necessarily want to write about the typical example, the typical knight, or the typical king or peasant. It's the ones who are a little more complicated than that give you a little more juice to write about. You know, what didn't happen, where I think some of my fellow fantasists move into fantasy is with their depictions of the class system. My books were at least partly written as an answer to what I call the Disneyland fantasies out there, where writers who Tolkien imitators chiefly, who love having the princesses and the knights and the castles and all of that. So they put all of that in, but they don't really seem to realize what it grew out of, like the class distinction. So you always get the scene where the spunky peasant girl tells off the the arrogant lord. The spunky peasant girl who told off a real arrogant lord in like 1223 would have had her head chopped off, or at least her tongue ripped out. You know, these social systems had teeth. You can't just take 21st century Americans and put them in surcoats and mantles and give them a sword and pretend that they're medieval people. The medieval way of thinking was quite different.
Leadership is an interesting issue in your writing. There's some really bad bosses here.
Yes, well, then and now, right?
Yeah. But is that an interesting issue of how to be a great leader, the elements that takes, or how they fail?
It's something I want my readers to think about, yeah, because it's not easy. I mean, again, there's a certain metafictional thing here where partly what I'm doing is I'm engaging in a debate with the fantasists who have gone before me. Bad ones, but also great ones like Tolkien and Mervyn Peake and T.H. White and some of the great artists who have written seminal works of fantasy. There's an assumption in Tolkien, and mind you, Tolkien was doing something very different than what I'm doing, so I'm not criticizing him for not doing, but he's drawing from long traditions of myth where the king was very closely associated with the land. And if you had a good king, then the land would prosper. And if you had a bad king, the land would wither. And like someone like Aragorn, who becomes king at the end of Lord of the Rings, and Aragorn ruled for 100 years, and he ruled wisely and well. It's all very well to say that he ruled wisely and well, because he was a good man. But actually, if from where I look at it, I look at the real world, and I look at real kings, and I look at real presidents and lords, and you know, being a good man is not enough. It's not enough. It wasn't enough then, and it's not enough now. I mean, if that was enough, Jimmy Carter would have been like the best president of the 20th century, because he certainly proved, I think, that he's probably the best man of all the people who have served as president, the most moral and compassionate and intelligent and all of that. But he wasn't that terrific a president. On the other hand, we've had some presidents, and in the old days they've had some kings, who were probably terrible people, but they were good for their countries because they made the correct decisions, you know. So I look at Aragorn and say, well, what was his tax policy? What was his, you know, after the war, what did he do with all these leftover orcs? You know, did he hunt them down and kill them all? Or did he follow a policy of orc genocide? Or did he just let live, and then, of course, they would breed more, and then the orcs would come boiling out of the mountains? I mean, that's a problem. How do you solve that problem?
In this last season of the show, we've watched Daenerys struggle with leadership and how to, you know, how fierce she should be with the people she's vanquished. Should she kill all the slave masters? How many should live? And she's stumbling.
And this is a huge part of A Dance with Dragons, the 5th book in the series. Dany's attempts to rule in Meereen and the struggles that she's having in Meereen are a major theme of that book. How do you do this? It's not easy. It's not like, oh, here's the right decision to do, you know. If we all knew the right decision, then we wouldn't have the kind of vituperative politics that we have, because obviously in our society or in any society, there are people who think this is the right way to go. No, this is the right way to go. We have to be harder. We have to be softer. We have to go to war. We have to make peace. You know, we look at this, and we look at history. People look at history, real history, from the benefit of hindsight, and you have to take hindsight off the table, I think, when you're analyzing this, and try to think about these issues as the time. And I'm trying to give my characters, especially the ruling characters, some difficult problems to solve, and then their own beliefs and their own personality and their own views on what the obligation of a king or lord is to their people comes through, you know. So
you mentioned beliefs. Religion is a thread that flows through here. What is it about faith that attracts you?
Well, religion has played a huge part in human history and was very important in the Middle Ages. So I think it really needs to be reflected in fantasy. And particularly in a world where real magic exists. We get to, I was talking about it earlier with the dragons and the witches and all that, but, you know, consider that. I mean, we have a society now where some people are very religious, some people are basically secular and agnostic or atheist, or even if they do follow religion, they don't really guide their actions by it. It's sort of paying lip service to it. But imagine what the effect would be on religion today, on the world today, if any of our religions actually could perform miracles. Imagine if there was someone going around raising the dead, or walking on water, or multiplying the fishes and the bread. You know, everybody would follow that religion. It would be on television. You would be interviewing them and not me, you know, and we wouldn't have any hunger anymore because we had all the bread and fish we want, and, you know, it would change things. Well, the fantasy, many fantasies out there have real magic, and they have real magic, in some of them, a lot of powerful magic. And then you wonder why they have multiple religions then, because if people can actually do this kind of stuff, I think everybody would follow them. Now, in my world, the religion is there, but it's more like the real world. People believe, people think that certain things are happening, but the gods don't actually turn up, and the miracles are unreliable, and we don't quite know how everything works. We think there may be agencies, supernatural agencies at work, but meanwhile there are various contesting religions with their belief systems and their pantheons that are struggling for supremacy.
You spent time as a screenwriter, and you've written several episodes for HBO. Do you wish that you could write them all?
I wish I could write more of them. You know, we do 10 episodes a season, and I write one usually. But if I wasn't writing the books, I would be hopefully a bigger part of the show, and I could write, you know, 2 episodes, maybe 3 episodes a season. That would be fun. But you know, that's, I can wish for it, but it's not going to happen. I still have 2 enormous books to write. I have The Winds of Winter, what I'm working on right now, and that's going to be another monster. And then when I finish that, I have the last book, A Dream of Spring, which is going to be another 1,500-page monster where I try to wrap all this up. And these books take me a long, long time to do. So even just writing 1 episode a season, it is going increasingly hard because it's, you know, you have to put the book aside and sort of go back in time to things you wrote 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 years ago and do new versions of them. It kind of breaks the stride a little. So yeah, I wish I could be more involved in the show. I wish I could be over there in Belfast on a set. I wish I could be taking part in all the auditions and the casting sessions and seeing the dailies and working on it the way I worked on the TV shows like Beauty and the Beast and The Twilight Zone when I was more active in television. But the truth is I can't, so.
You've lived here in Santa Fe since 1979.
Right.
But have things changed for you recently as the profile of the show and the books has raised and your face is in magazines?
Actually, yes, things have changed a lot for me in probably in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, I've always been a successful writer. I've had a excellent career since I sold my first story in '71. I won awards early on. I was able to support myself as a full-time writer since 1979. I made pretty good money. With these books, I started hitting the bestseller lists with Clash of Kings. The second one was the first book of mine to hit the bestseller list. Since then, each one has done better. So I've always been a successful writer. But what the show has done is made me a celebrity writer. And that's different. I had not anticipated that. And yes, I have now reached a point where I am recognized everywhere I go. I can't go through an airport without stopping for 5 photographs and signing people's napkins, and you know, occasionally one of them actually has the books. In restaurants, in going to the movies, anywhere, I'm known. I don't know. Now there's good things. People come up to me, are very nice. They're great. You know, but sometimes it gets a little tiring just because there's so many of them. I just keep telling myself it won't be forever. This is my 15 minutes of fame, right? And, you know, 5 years from now, there'll be some other show on television, and Game of Thrones will be thought of, hopefully fondly, as like NYPD Blue or Hill Street Blues or you know, one of the great shows in television history. But it won't be on, and there'll be some new hot thing that everybody will be all excited about, and I can sort of go back to being just a writer and not a celebrity.
You recently established a screenwriting grant.
I did, yes, with the New Mexico Film Foundation, a new group founded by Dirk Norris to try to promote television and film production here in the land of enchantment. And writing is part of that. Of course, I'm a writer, so it's for science fiction and fantasy scripts by New Mexico residents, $5,000 annually.
Maybe one of those shows everybody watches next will be written by a New Mexican.
That would be great.
You've also recently been raising a lot of money for the Wolf Sanctuary and a food bank.
The Food Depot here in Santa Fe, yes, they feed hungry people of northern New Mexico. And the Wild Spirit Wolf Sanctuary down in Candy Kitchen that rescues wolves and wolf dogs. We're raising a lot of money for it, so hopefully a few more wolves will be rescued and a few New Mexicans will be a little less hungry.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.